Hello everyone, we have made our own bedroom unit. We are really pleased with the way it's come out. Have a look at this. We designed it to fit from wall to wall and floor to ceiling. Building it this way gave us two advantages. The first was it made it easier and cheaper to build as it didn't need sides or a top. The second was its volume. This was the largest it could be as the internal walls were in fact the walls and ceiling of the room itself. Now, hold on to your hats. I'll show you what our new bedroom unit replaced. Two wardrobes, a chest of drawers and lots of boxes and bags. It worked okay, but it was a complete dust magnet and didn't look very nice at all. We needed furniture to give us as much space as we could get from our room and perhaps something we wouldn't be too embarrassed about showing off to other people. So, we listed what we wanted from a bedroom unit. Oh, I love a good list. We started sketching on a piece of paper and tried to come up with ideas of what we could build to be our new bedroom unit. When you look at something that's been built, you stand back and you think, yeah, that's obvious, couldn't be built any other way. But right at the beginning of the journey, when you're scratching your head trying to come up with that good idea, it's not so obvious. After a while, we found ourselves coming back to the same arrangement of cupboards, drawers and wardrobes. So that's the one that we chose. Have a look at this. This is an image from my logbook. It's the one that we were looking at when we said, yes, this is the layout we need. With the decision made on how our unit will look, we started working out basic dimensions and how we're going to build the thing. We're going to start here with the 9 drawers. This is what it looks like built. There are in fact 3 units here, and each unit, as you can see, will hold 3 drawers. But this is jumping the gun a little. We're in the conservatory now, a temporary workshop. 17mm thick plywood has been cut to size, enough to manufacture 3 drawer carcasses. Each of those carcasses will be large enough to hold 3 drawers. Screwed butt joints will be used to secure the sides onto the base and the 2 top panels onto the sides. In the top 2 corners at the rear, I'm adding 90-degree supports. These are held in place with screws through from the side and the top of the carcass. I don't want to see the edges of the plywood once the carcass is finished, so I'm going to be making 20mm thick trim out of pine to fit to all the forward edges. This trim will be held in place by pocket hole screws through from the 4 forward edges of the carcass. I have a whole video showing how to set up and use the pocket hole jig, so I won't go into that here. If you would like to see that video, I've placed a link to it at the end of this video and also in the description. The first carcass is placed in the corner of the bedroom to see how it looks. It sits on 4 height adjustable feet screwed in place to the underside of its base. The pocket holes I drilled to hold the trim in place later can be seen on the base and the right hand side. These are also present but difficult to see on the top and the left hand side. I clear the floor for the next 2 carcasses and place a second carcass in position. It turns out the floor in the bedroom isn't flat, it falls 25mm, that's an inch from the right hand wall to the left. The adjustable feet on the 3 units will easily adjust to that though. The skirting board on the wall is very close to the underside of the units, so I decide to remove it. This will prevent any problems later if I need to adjust the height of the units. Once the 3 carcasses have been levelled using their adjustable feet, they're screwed to each other through their touch and side walls. The right hand unit is screwed to the bedroom wall in 3 positions, just here. And all the units are screwed to the rear wall through their corner supports in their top corners. The wall is not flat or square. To keep the 3 carcasses nice and straight, I use shims between the carcasses themselves and the wall where I fit the securing screws. And that's it! The first part is complete. 3 carcasses in place and secured to the wall. Next thing to do is make the 9 drawers. I want to see dovetail joints at their corners, so I searched the internet to see what jigs are available to help. Lee dovetail jig seems to be a good one. There's a lot of information on YouTube, and Peter Parfitt of the New Brick Workshop shows off a storage box he's designed that can also be used to increase the working height of the dovetail jig. The jig is quite expensive, but I have several projects coming up where I'd like to use dovetail or comb joints. I bite the bullet, leave open the old wallet and buy the Lee dovetail jig. Once it arrives, I make a storage box for it. It's very similar to the one designed by Peter Parfitt, and both the jig and the storage box work very well together. I had some 18mm thick MDF left over from another project. It's that I used to make the box. All the joints are screwed together. I was going to use glue, but then decided not to until I'd used the box for a while to make sure it didn't need any modifications. The two posts you can see here allow me to keep the VRS dust extraction system on the jig while it's still in the box. It stops any weight going onto the VRS and transfers it straight onto the chassis of the jig. 4 over-centre clips keeps the top in place. The wings at the bottom of the box gives you somewhere to clamp it down to the workbench, but they do increase the size of the box's footprint. Now to work out how the jig works. I make a couple of practice joints, then once I feel happy-ish, I give it a go and make one corner of a drawer. This includes cutting the rebate for the drawer base panel to fit into. I'm glad I did this, as the practice showed me I mustn't take the rebate to the front or back of the drawer, or this hole arrives. I get into drawer production. 9 drawers, that's 36 joints I could mess up. I set up the router with the slotting bit, then clamp the router to the workbench. Cut the rebates, remembering not to machine the slot right to the end of either of the drawer sides. It stops there. Start to build the first drawer. It's all together and looking good. I take it apart again. Anne gives a hand, she brushes on the wood glue, and I start to assemble. I only have a couple of clamps and a lot of drawers. The joints seem quite tight, so once the drawers are assembled I don't clamp across them. I do need to keep them flat, so I stack them one on top of the other on the workbench. Actually, not using the clamps does cause a problem. I'll chat about that in a bit. These are the drawer runners we're going to be using. I buy them from Screwfix. Their part number is 43879. 2 sliders come in one pack. Their description is soft close ball bearing drawer runners, 550mm. The drawer runners are 12mm thick. As a drawer requires 2 runners, its width must be 24mm narrower than the opening it has to fit into. All the carcasses are the same width. The drawers, fingers crossed, are all exactly 24mm narrower. I fit the inside rail of the slider to the first drawer, and I fit the outside of the sliders to the carcass. The drawer fits into the carcass, but it's a bit tight. I check the dimensions and find all the drawers have grown by about 1mm in width. I think this is because I didn't clamp the drawers as the adhesive was drying. Each joint has floated apart about 0.5mm, making the drawers grow by 1mm in width. If the slider is tight, the soft close feature doesn't work very well. The next clip shows how I adjusted the drawers to sort the problem. For some reason I call the dovetail joint a tongue and groove joint. 4 of the drawers, which I made for upstairs. There's another 2 there. There's 2 upstairs in the cabinet, and there's 1 more out here. Now when I made the drawers, I made them with these tongue and groove joints in the outside, and I didn't have any clamps when I glued them together, and they've all come apart by about 0.5mm or so. So now when I put them into the cupboards, the slides that the drawers go on, which are along here, they're a little bit tight. So when the drawers go in, I can get the drawers in okay, but when you pull them out and push them back in again, you can feel they're tight. So what I'm going to do is take the runners off again and then route along here. I'm routing a strip about 30mm wide on both sides and 0.5mm deep, and that'll give me 1mm, which means these should then go back into the sliders and then slide in nice and comfy. I scratched my head for a while wondering how I was going to hold these and route them, and what I came up with were these 2 bits of wood which I've clamped down to the workbench. And if I grab this, it's one hand, can I get it on? And this drawer just slips on nicely like that, and now it's held fairly solid. This goes to each side, and now I can take that slider off, get the router, and then route along here. Now what I was finding is I'm building up a bit of production line at the moment. These 2 I've already done. Now the cutter that I have is only about 15mm in diameter, and I need a slot of 30mm, in fact just over 30, so I've got to go along 3 cuts. So at the moment I've set up just to do the top cut, and then once I get through all these drawers I will do the centre cut, and then I'll go through the drawers, and then I'll do the bottom cut. Now the 2 drawers that aren't here, they are up in the cabinet already. I've cut those and it works fine, so I know that this is a good solution to the problem that I had. One thing I did have was the vacuum hose here. that was catching along these edges, and I had to put it down and then try and put it around my neck to hold it away so I didn't get cut. And then I thought, hang on a minute, if I get a bungee strap, so from the skylight I've got a bungee strap coming down to another bungee strap which I've tied around the vacuum tube, which is there. There we go, and that works really well. So it's a handy place to have a skylight. And this is the router that I'm using. If I show you the cutter, it's just a normal, I think it's, there it is there. So it's only coming out away from this surface, 0.5 millimetre, and that's enough to, I hope it's going to be enough, so all the drawers will then slide in nice and neat. Anyway, I better get on with this and we'll see how it goes. For the bottom drawer to be at the correct level, I'd worked out its slider in the carcass has to be 27.5 millimetres up from the top surface of the base. I make up 2 spacers to fit under the slider while I screw it in place. Now remember, there's a 20 millimetre pine trim to fit down the front of the carcass, and that's why the sliders look like they're too far forward. I fit the first drawer, and then once the width problem is solved, I look at the middle drawer. I've worked out the middle and top drawer sliders need to be 52.5 millimetres up from the top of the drawer below them. I make up another spacer and start to fit the sliders and the drawers. Now all the drawers are in place and working nicely, the next job is to fit the 20 millimetre thick pine trim. Unfortunately, the screws that hold it in place need to come through the pocket holes, and they are all on the inside of the carcass. So I have to take out all the drawers so I can get to those pocket holes. As the drawers are sliding quite nicely, I mark their position on their rear faces. This will ensure that they go back in the same position and everything will keep working nicely. There are 4 pieces of vertical trim to fit. One here, here, and here. There are 6 pieces of horizontal trim. They go here. I want all the verticals to be the same width. That's 34 millimetres, the thickness of 2 layers of the 17 millimetre plywood. In this picture we're looking down the end wall at the top of the right hand carcass. You can see my right foot. But more importantly, that I've spaced the carcass away from the wall. This allows for the 34 millimetre trim to fit just here. This looks like a waste of space, but it's needed. Each of the 9 drawers are going to be fitted with a front panel that will overlap the trim all round. Having space here ensures the 3 front panels on the right will not rub against the wall as the drawer is poured out. I'm not using any adhesive. 4 screws will hold the trim in place. The 4th pocket hole is under the lower slider. I have to remove it to get to the hole. Once the vertical trim is in position, I fit the horizontals. These are the same depth at 20 millimetres, but only 17 millimetres wide, as they only have to cover 1 layer of plywood. The trim is fitted, and all the drawers are in position. The drawers are working, but do not yet have their front panels or handles. They'll be coming a little later. So, with the drawers in place, in the next video we're going to be looking at the build of the high cupboards, the wardrobes, the long hanging bar that goes within the wardrobe. We've got shelves that go between the wardrobes and those high cupboards as well. There's lots of things to do inside this bedroom unit. Could you do something like this? Of course you can. And with that, this video is at an end. Take care everybody. I'll see you next time. Could you do something like this? Of course you can.